Today we're looking at lesson 1-2.4. We're going to be getting into the heart of the economics of feudalism and looking at its most essential component, because without the manor, the whole system really breaks down. The manor is where everything in a feudal society is made. This is where all the resources are produced that work their way up the chain all the way to the king. Without the manor, we have no feudalism. But what is a manor? A manor is essentially the residence of whomever holds power in an area. Usually here we're talking about a lord, but it could also be a landed knight. There's a difference between landed knights and unlanded knights. Landed knights will have their own manor. Unlanded knights are more for military service and overseeing a larger lord's territory. But whoever holds that power is going to live on a manor. The manor itself refers to the manor house, this guy up here, nice looking manor house, and all the lands around it. Now, this picture does not really encapsulate the size of a manor. The manor is much, much greater than that. This is just kind of a snapshot, but it's going to have fields for the serfs to work in, a place for the serfs to live, but additionally, it's also going to have a house of worship and some other areas for essential components of medieval life to occur. You know, you've got to have your tools, you've got to have all those other things that make farming possible. So that is the manor in a nutshell. The history of manors really dates back all the way to Roman times. In the Roman Empire, you would have these incredibly wealthy people who were the leaders of the empire, the members of the Roman Senate, and they were fabulously wealthy individuals. Many of them make individuals like Bill Gates look poor, and that's not an exaggeration. Some of these guys were fabulously wealthy, owned and controlled land, which amounts to small countries. These guys were rich, rich, rich. But they couldn't all own land right in Rome. There's not enough land. So mostly their wealth was drawn from villas that existed out in the countryside. Okay, so they would live in Rome, they would work in Rome, but they owned these huge villas outside, these large landed estates from which they would draw an income. Well, as the empire is starting to collapse and as this breaks down, and especially after the sack of Rome, many of these leaders take off back to their villas. Some maintain control of those villas for a long time. Generally speaking, those villas pass into the hands of other individuals down the line, the conquerors. Somebody takes over that villa, but the manor house, the villa house, remains pretty much intact. The services around it remain pretty much intact. Fields are fields, so farmers go out and farm the fields, and that system kind of maintains itself so that we have all these little individual territories, sometimes called fiefdoms, that pop up throughout the Middle Ages and the Dark Ages. So this is really just the leftovers of this Roman villa system, or copies of that Roman villa system that are popping up all over the place. Now, the economy of the manor is a simple yet complicated thing. It's simple because it's self-sufficient. Manors do not exist based on trade. There's little resources coming into a manor. Almost nothing comes into the manor, except for maybe a few items, a few luxury items that the lord may be able to afford. Mostly, though, the goods that are being produced in the manor are being produced in the manor. They need to produce all of their own stuff within their own lands because they cannot count on trade during this time period. Simply, the roads are not good enough, communication's not good enough. So they are producing their own food, their own cloth, tools, lumber, wine, etc. Here we have an image of a brewer, an essential component of medieval life. Got to have beer. Here's a tanner. That's going to be somebody who makes leather. So if you want to have leather clothing, and especially if you're going to be fighting any wars, you want to have a little bit of leather armor for protection, you've got to have a tanner on site. This guy down here is a blacksmith. We need tools to work the fields. You got to have axes to cut down trees. You got to have a blacksmith. And all that existed within every manor so that the manor could provide for its own needs. So in many ways, a manor resembles kind of a small town or a village. It's got all those little components to it. Now, when you want to protect this, because you got to protect your own people, you got to protect your land, you got to protect your resources, sometimes you just don't have enough by yourself. And that's where the greater system of feudalism comes in. This is where manoralism, okay, living on these manors, operating these self-sufficient manors, is simply not enough. Because if you got a lot of good stuff on your manor, somebody else is going to want it. If somebody else wants it, you are under constant threat. And if they're more powerful than you, then you're out of luck. It's theirs. Unless you have powerful friends. And there's no better way to have powerful friends in medieval Europe than to pay them for their friendship. That is the feudal obligation. So the lords of the manors are going to enter into these feudal relationships with greater lords and with kings, where they will provide service to those lords and kings, pay taxes to that king, and all in return for protection, to make sure that that manor is safe from those who would want to go in and take all the good stuff that they've got. Here we have an image of what a medieval siege would look like, with our manor house protected by walls, because, you know, if you're in a rough area, you want to have some protection. But that's not necessarily always going to protect you from an invading army. You've got to have an army of your own. You don't get this for free, though. Being in this feudal relationship means that you owe your protectors an essential service. This service includes military aid for when the kingdom as a whole is under a threat. If the whole kingdom is under a threat, not just your little part of it, well, everybody is stronger together if everybody contributes to that. So you contribute to your part by sending knights, by sending men, forming up a larger army that can take on the larger army of another kingdom. You also pay in the form of taxes, which at this time is almost exclusively food rent. That is, you're paying a portion of the food. So you have your serfs out in the field harvesting crops. And then that winds up being a food rent that is paid to your overall lord, which again can be consumed by the lord or used by the lord to sell off for trade. Okay, little trade here, but kings in general are still involved in some trade up at that level, or to, you know, as discussed in class, to help out members of your society who are in need, strengthening those feudal relationships. In addition, we usually have homage and fealty, this public promise to be the servant of the king. You want to make this public. The king wants everybody to know that you have sworn to uphold and protect the rulings of the king and the king's life, and etc. Because if you say it publicly, you're more likely to, you know, actually follow through. So that is all a part of the obligations of the lord of a manor within the feudal system. We're going to be looking more at the manor next time, so this is not all that we're going to cover. We're going to take another look at what life is like for those living in a manor, but that is all for today. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.